they've tried as well with multiple different releases, Spaces, Super Follow, Twitter Blue, all trying to drive daily actives and I guess optimize monetization. But yeah, things look grim. Do you think there's any way they can correct their course?
I think it's funny, and I speak about this a lot from, or my perception on a lot of this is really from a user, because I use the product all the time. Spaces seems like they really cracked something, and maybe that's still true today. As a writer and someone who accounts, my user growth for my subscription service, the vast majority, at least historically, has been from organic Twitter, from building an audience on the platform. Twitter bought something called Review, which is essentially a competing newsletter service to Substack. And when they bought it, it was a really small team and, basically a relatively new product in terms of functionality and the like. But it's integrated directly into your kind of Twitter user base, and you can see how that could potentially be really compelling. And I kind of wrote in the first article that I put out about the company that I think it's a good example of where a lot of their problems lie. The service has some pretty glaring, and I'm as far as I know, they still haven't addressed some of these things, but it has some pretty glaring feature gaps. For example, for one, when you read an article at the time, when you get to the bottom and they have a thumbs up or thumbs down for the article, it wasn't even a button. It was just a picture. You couldn't click it. So it wasn't a real thing, basically. Another glaring example, they wrote a blog review. The team at Review wrote a blog 2 or 3 years prior that said, here's how you can kind of build and sustain a subscriber base. One of the things they discussed was annual subscriptions, which is something that's very important as a product feature for a writer like myself. To this day, as far as I know, Review still doesn't have annual subscriptions. They only have monthly. So, it's simple things that if they spoke to 3 writers who do this for a living and asked what gaps do we need to fill, it's stuff you should be able to fix very, very easily. Their inability to do so, in my mind, speaks to a lot of the problem. And I've just always questioned whether the approach should be to go out and buy something like that versus finding ways to really intelligently partner with someone like Substack to say, listen, this isn't our core competency. We are kind of the social network for someone like you, and you have to have us in order to grow your business, and we'll participate in it that way. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the business is overwhelmingly advertising revenues, and no matter what you say about subscriptions, tipping, super follows, etc., they just really haven't shown any ability to get the user base to be willing to pay for those things. So they're a difficult spot. And again, just to add to the prior answer, now you're dealing with cultural issues as well, and employees. There was a lot of talk about, hey, if Elon actually buys this company, internally it's going to be a big issue. And, you're starting to see big names at the company leave, and that's rarely a good thing. Parag wrote, pretty prescient in hindsight, basically there's going to be a lot of noise. We're just going to keep our heads down and continue to do the work that we need to do. And that was a letter he wrote to employees when the deal was either first announced or when it actually closed. And, I think we've seen over the last 6 weeks or so that has proven very, very difficult to do. And it's not good for Twitter.